Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. It's a great rainy day. I've had a wonderful pumpkin spice latte and some gingerbread. Little baby is taking a nap, so it's time to read some Niccolo Machiavelli. We're on chapter 11 on ecclesiastical principalities. Let us begin and dive into the mind of the legend. At present, the only thing remaining for us to do is to speak of ecclesiastical principalities, concerning which all the difficulties occur before one takes possession of them, for they are acquired either through ability virtue. Okay, so acquired either through ability virtue or through fortune. Okay, so fortune favors the bold. Ability, virtue. Okay, so this is spoken about quite a lot in his book. So it's very important for you to annotate that. And they are maintained without either, since they are sustained by the ancient institutions of religion. Okay, so they're not the institutions of the ecclesiastical principalities, he contends, are not maintained with ability and virtue and fortune, but actually because they're ancient institutions of religion, which are so powerful and such a quality that they keep their princes in power no matter what they do. Okay, so or how they live. This is great, because I really wanted to dig in more to this. I got so many other books I want to read. I read books offline as well, but Italy has such a history with Rome and the Catholics that the corruption is quite a tale. And it's fascinating how so many people focus on the modern problems of Muslims but ignore the Christian history in Italy, right? And the popes and backstabbings and conspiracy. Because he mentions right here that if there's a prince, right, someone who the church has picked, they're really going to try to keep them in power, showing the political nature of the Christian church. Founding fathers of America were very well versed in this, okay? And that is one reason why they thought they wanted to have separation of church and state. That is why it's funny when you have European immigrants to America who are Christian, and then they kind of have this struggle between religion and secularism. It's a big contention. Whereas us Muslims say you don't rule by anything other than Allah. You try to do your best to follow the Sharia, and abide by the laws. But Muslims openly want a theocracy, whereas Christians now almost feel ashamed to say that they want that. And they push the founding fathers' republicanism, which has secular leanings to it. It's fascinating. So he here is touching on that vein of corruption. These princes alone have states and do not defend them, subjects and do not govern them. So notice this. If you are going to be a prince and have states, it's your duty to defend that. He's talking about the responsibilities of the leader. And if you have subjects, they have to be governed. So notice this. A government is supposed to govern its subjects. You're not supposed to have absolute freedom to just do whatever you want, because to be governed is to set up a parameter, to set up limitations, right? And guideposts for your people to follow. And their states, though not defended, are not taken from them, and their subjects, though not governed, are not concerned about it, and neither think of nor are capable of revolting from them. Only these principalities, therefore, are secure and prosperous. But as they are upheld by a higher cause, religion, which the human mind cannot reach, I shall leave off speaking of them, for it would be the action of a presumptuous and foolhardy man to discuss them, since they are raised up and preserved by God. So here, it's almost reminding me of the divine right of kings, which was this Christian ruling, but also Amir al-Mu'minin, basically the guiding force of the believers, the leader of the believers, right? For us Muslims, you don't rebel against the leader, some would argue. It's a topic of discussion that I'm still learning about, but you don't rebel against the Muslim leader, right? Because they're trying their best to rule by what Allah has legislated. So it's preserved by Allah, a system of the Sharia, right? And so their system's gonna stay. Fascinating. So preserved systems of theocracy, and people respecting that preserved system and not trying to tear it down, whereas in an atheist republic, an atheist secular system, right, rebellion is fine. And it's almost like, if you look at the French, they're constantly protesting, and it's almost like protesting is part of their daily life. It's kind of chaotic as well, because it halts the economy, and the leaders almost become indifferent to protesting because it's so common. But then if you look at communist China, which is atheistic, they'll smash down with force a protest, you know. And so their system isn't preserved by God, right, for the communists. It's preserved through the force of the state. So the threat, either by God or by the state, either way, you're gonna have a system that is trying to preserve itself, right, to govern the people. Nevertheless, if someone inquired of me how it has come about that the church has reached such greatness in the temporal sphere. Okay, so the church reaching greatness in the temporal sphere, considering the prior to Alexander the Italian powers, and not merely those who are called powers, but every baron or lord. So baron, feudal system, right? Baron, lord, however insignificant, used to hold it in little esteem with regard to temporal sphere. And now a king of France trembles before it. So here he's hinting at how kings were fearful of upsetting the Pope, upsetting the church, upsetting the religious. It's fascinating. Especially when you look at the history of Christianity in France, right? And look at it today with Macron. It's, whoa. And it has been able to drive him out of Italy and to bring the Venetians to ruin. Although this is well known, it does not seem superfluous to me to call a good portion of it to mind. Before Charles, the King of France, came to Italy, this country was under the rule of the Pope, the Venetians, the King of Naples, the Duke of Milan, and the Florentines. Again, very cool thing here is learning more about Italian history. Us American-born Italians should learn about our history, right? And the city-states kind of Italy, this sort of factional, non-united front, is just mind-blowing when you look at how expansive the Roman Empire was to how it dwindled to these broken up, warring places. It's amazing. These powers necessarily had two principal concerns. One, that no foreigner should enter Italy by force of arms. The other, that none of those powers should occupy more territory. So don't let others in by force of arms, and don't let others in who will occupy more territory. So colonization, occupying more territory, that sounds like colonization to me. People coming in with weapons and slowly moving what they've taken. Those they had to worry about most were the Pope and the Venetians. Fascinating. The Pope and the Venetians. You know, I want to read some biographies of these popes, because it's just amazing to see the contradictions of today. Like how what we would call the mighty have fallen. How militaristic and ambitious the Catholic men were, to now allowing lesbian priests and drag shows and putting up the rainbow flag in their places and being pacifist, limp-wristed people. It's fascinating. To hold back the Venetians required the union of all the others, as was the case in the defense of Ferrara. And to keep the Pope down, they made use of the Roman barons. Okay, so to keep the Pope down, they made use of the Roman barons. Roman barons. Who, being divided into two factions, the Orsini and the Colonna. Okay, so Roman barons, two factions, so Orsini, Colonna, always had some reason for dissension between them. So here, always had some reason of dissension between them. I want you to remember this because Alexander Hamilton, right? He talked about how he wanted the United States because factions, they're always going to find a reason to fight. When religions split up into different sects, they always have reasons to fight. It's very hard to have a united front. Think about how there's a very famous, well, let's put it this way. When King Robert Baratheon in Game of Thrones says, what's worse? What's more, 5 or 1? And Cersei says, 5. But then Robert's like, 1. One real army behind one leader. Because if you look at the hand itself, it's like you would think a confederacy, right? The tribes of Native American Indians did that, right? It just didn't work. They couldn't unite, couldn't agree, but the colonists, the frontier people who were expanding westward, were united. And this led to them being conquered. How did Hernan Cortez help to disrupt Mexico and take it over, right? And get the smaller villages to rebel against the Aztec rulership. He created factions, right? Split them up, divide them. And then the Spanish forces were won. Now, the indigenous languages of Mexico, they're still there, but the majority is Spanish speaking, right? It's mind-blowing. That's why I like reading about these biographies of the conquerors, because you'll see the military strategies if you map them out. Okay? You begin to see all these patterns. So when Machiavelli now is mentioning the Orsini and Colonna, these two factions of the Roman barons, and how they always found dissension between them, you're beginning to see some patterns, right? It's fascinating. And who, standing with their arms in their hands, right under the Pope's eyes, kept papacy weak and unstable. Notice this. Kept the papacy weak and unstable. Getting the factions to have dissension between them made it weak and unstable. Boom. We're seeing patterns and patterns and patterns. And although there arose now and then a resolute pope. So if someone said they want a resolute Khalifa for the Muslim Ummah, Catholics today would call that terrorism. Whereas Machiavelli says resolute pope, that's like, oh, that's totally fine. And if you contrast this type of pope to the pope they have now, you would see like, oh, how the mighty have fallen. Like Sixtus, nevertheless, neither fortune nor wisdom was ever able to liberate him from these inconveniences, and the shortness of their lives was the reason for this, because in 10 years, which on average is the lifespan of a pope, he might with difficulty put down one of the factions. So notice this, a little bit of humor here. 10 years, which is the average lifespan of a pope, pointing at assassinations and coups, right? Might with difficulty put down one of the factions. So pointing out how The popes were trying to be someone who unified their front and were able to stamp out opposition. And if, for example, one pope had almost eliminated the Colonna, another one would rise up who was hostile to the Orsini, which would cause the resurgence of the Colonna, although he did not have time to eliminate the Orsini. Consequently, the temporal powers of the Pope got little respect in Italy. So, this almost sounds a lot like the right-left in America. A Republican gets up, and they're trying to stop the left, and it goes back and forth. It's just like a ping-pong match. But it's still the left and right foot marching onwards to a path that may not be where the American people want to go. So, here, these two factions distracting the Pope from doing more spiritual work can actually hurt their religion overall. It's very fascinating. Which makes them lose respect of the people, because they're not spending time to expand and flourish, but rather to stomp out fires, which distracts and drains the energy. Then came Alexander VI, who, of the pontiffs who have ever existed, showed how much a pope with money and troops could accomplish. Okay, so Alexander VI, a pope with cash, money, and an army. Troops could accomplish by making Duke Valentino his instrument and seizing the opportunity to provide the French invasion. So a pope participating in war. It's a little bit of jihad. But, they don't want to admit it. He did all those things that I discussed earlier when speaking of the actions of the Duke. And although his intention was to make the Duke, not the Church, great, ooh, that's a slap. Nevertheless, what he did resulted in the greatness of the Church, which, after he died and the Duke was destroyed, became the heir of his labors. Then came Pope Julius, and he found the Church powerful, for it possessed all the Romagna, had eliminated the Roman barons, and had annihilated the factions thanks to the blows struck by Alexander. So what do you see here? Alexander VI helped to get rid of the Roman barons, which was the Orsini and Colonna, which made the Catholic Church more powerful. They weren't trying to be like, no, we occupy here and you occupy there. We're scared of you atheists. Oh, we're very liberal. No, you can see the total difference of those men back then. It's really fascinating. And he also found the way open for accumulating wealth by a method never used before the time of Alexander. These things Julius not only continued, but intensified, and he resolved to win Bologna, destroyed the Venetians, and chased the French from Italy. Notice that. A pope chasing the French out of Italy. The popes being invested in their nation. Right? Very cool when you think about how the whole map of Europe has just fluctuated. And he succeeded in all these undertakings, and with all the more praise for him, since he did everything to increase the power of the Church. Okay? He did everything to increase the power of the Church. Okay? Wow. Julius. Pope Julius. We're going to write that down. Pope Julius. Okay, and then we had Alexander VI. And not that any private individual. He also kept the Orsini and Colonna factions in the stationed conditions in which he found them. And although there were some leaders among them who wanted to make changes, nonetheless, there were two things that kept them in line. Okay, so two things that kept the factions in line. First, the great power of the Church, which dismayed them. Second, their not having cardinals of their own, who are the source the conflicts between them. For these factions are never at peace when they have cardinals. Ooh, deny them cardinals. We're learning about church hierarchy. It's the way in which it's set up and how that relates to statesmanship. For the latter nourish factions inside and outside of Rome. Nourishing factions inside and outside of Rome. And those barons are forced to defend them, so that from the ambition of the prelates are born the discords and tumults among the barons. So this is hinting at the sort of dirty politics that the cardinals participated in, which created a tumultuous and discordious, unharmonious atmosphere. Thus, His Holiness Pope Leo, okay, so now we have Pope Leo, has found the papacy most powerful. One hopes that if the former popes made it great by force of arms, okay, force of arms, this one, through his goodness and countless other virtues, will make it very great and worthy of veneration. Wow, this is pretty cool. A very fascinating section here. Because the more we learn about history, the more equipped we as Muslims can be to stomp out some of the propaganda that seeks to slice the Achilles heel of, the Muslim Ummah. Because today, Christians are ashamed, many of them are ashamed of their militaristic past. They are ashamed and embarrassed by the triumphs of their religion in the past. Okay? It's fascinating. Now there's some notes here I wanted to read for you. Okay. Alexander is Pope Alexander VI Rodrigo Borgia. The Venetians were defeated by Pope Julius II at the Battle of Agnadello on May 14th, 1509, and then drove the French out of Italy in 1513 and was... Okay, little one's up from the nap. We'll pause there. Okay, maybe I'll finish reading some of the notes next time. If you'd like to join my blog, it's www.subscribestar.com/milhanarchive. Hope to see you there.